Aviation school is not for children of your status. Only wealthy people become pilots. Go learn a trade. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Marcus Johnson stood frozen in the cold, sterile office of Horizon Private Aviation Academy, the admission letter trembling in his hands. For a moment, his brain refused to process what he'd just heard. The words didn't make sense, not because they were complicated, but because they were destroying everything he'd ever believed about himself, about the world, about what was possible. Mr. Theodore Whitmore sat behind his enormous mahogany desk, leaning back in his expensive leather chair with the casual indifference of a man delivering weather forecasts rather than obliterating an 18-year-old's entire existence. His eyes, cold, gray, devoid of empathy, traveled slowly from Marcus's scuffed sneakers held together with duct tape, up his too short pants that exposed his ankles, to the button-down shirt that had once belonged to his father, carefully altered by his mother's loving hands to fit his smaller frame. Those eyes weren't just looking. They were judging, dismissing, erasing. Children of your status. The phrase echoed in Marcus's skull like a gunshot in an empty room. His chest tightened, his throat closed. The acceptance letter, that beautiful, sacred piece of paper he'd read 1,000 times, that had made his mother cry tears of joy, that had made his father pull him into the tightest hug of his life, suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Congratulations, Marcus Johnson. Based on your exceptional entrance examination scores, the highest we have seen in 15 years. The highest in 15 years. And it didn't matter. None of it mattered. Not the countless hours spent in the library while other kids his age were out having fun. Not the nights he'd stayed up until 3 a.m. teaching himself trigonometry because he'd read that pilots needed to understand angles and vectors. Not the birthdays he'd spent at airports, pressing his face against chain-link fences, watching planes take off with a longing so intense it physically hurt. Not the homemade pilot uniform his mother had sewn with her own hands because they couldn't afford a real one. Not the sacrifice his father had made, taking out a loan they couldn't afford, scraping together $3,000 from a salary that barely kept food on the table. None of it mattered because of his status. Marcus's hands began to shake. The letter rustled, the sound impossibly loud in the suffocating silence of the office. He wanted to speak, to defend himself, to say something. But what? What could he possibly say to a man who had looked at his entrance exam scores, at his documented passion for aviation, at his dreams and determination, and reduced it all to a matter of bank account balances? Mr. Whitmore tilted his head slightly, the way someone might observe an insect trapped under a glass. You're intelligent, I'll give you that. Your test scores prove it. But intelligence isn't enough in this industry, son. He said, son, the way you might address a stray dog you're shooing away from your property. Aviation requires resources. Significant, sustained financial resources. It's not just about getting in the door, it's about staying in year after year, paying for flight hours, certifications, licenses, type ratings. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars over a lifetime. Marcus found his voice, though it came out smaller than he wanted, cracking at the edges. But sir, I have the scholarship, the Hayes Scholarship. It covers tuition. Whitmore cut him off with a dismissive wave of his hand. It covers tuition. But there are fees, Mr. Johnson. Quarterly facility fees, insurance, equipment, books, uniforms, housing during practical training rotations. And that's just to get through school. After graduation, the type ratings you'll need to be competitive, those cost $15,000 to $50,000 each. How exactly do you plan to afford that? The question wasn't asked out of genuine curiosity. It was rhetorical, designed to make Marcus feel the full weight of his impossibility. I'll work, Marcus said, the words tumbling out desperately. Every hour I'm not in class, I'll work. I'll take on student loans if I have to. You'll what? Work yourself into crushing debt for a dream that may never materialize. Whitmore stood now, walking around his desk with his hands clasped behind his back. He moved with the confidence of a man who had never been told no, who had never had to fight for anything, who had been handed opportunities on silver platters his entire life. He stopped a few feet from Marcus, looking down at him from his superior height. "Let me tell you something about this industry, Mr. Johnson. I've been in aviation education for 30 years. Do you know how many students like you I've seen come through these doors? Brilliant kids from poor families, full of dreams and determination, absolutely convinced they can beat the odds." Marcus's stomach twisted. He knew where this was going. "Dozens," Whitmore continued, his voice taking on a cruel edge of satisfaction. "And do you know how many of them actually became pilots? Exactly 0. They all flamed out, ran out of money, couldn't keep up with the fees, dropped out with nothing but debt to show for it." He paused, letting that sink in. "The ones who make it, they come from families with money, families who can support them through the rough patches, families who can write checks without blinking." Marcus felt like he was drowning. The office walls seemed to close in. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, suddenly too bright, too loud, too everything. "You're setting yourself up for failure," Whitmore said, his tone shifting to something that almost sounded like pity, but wasn't. It was condescension masquerading as concern. "And worse, you're setting your family up for financial ruin. That loan your father took out? When you can't complete the program, and you won't be able to, Mr. Johnson, the statistics are clear, that debt will follow your family for years. Is that what you want? To burden your parents with thousands of dollars of debt for a dream that was never realistic to begin with?" The worst part was that Marcus could see the truth in it. He thought of his father, James, working double shifts, coming home exhausted, feet swollen, back aching. He thought of his mother, Sarah, taking in laundry and sewing jobs, her fingers perpetually pricked with needle marks, staying up late to finish alterations because every dollar mattered. He thought of his little sister, wearing hand-me-downs, never complaining but sometimes looking at other kids with their new clothes and new toys with a longing she tried to hide. His family had sacrificed everything for this moment. And this man, this wealthy, comfortable man who had probably never struggled for anything in his life, was telling Marcus that their sacrifice was worthless. "The kindest thing I can do for you right now," Whitmore said, returning to his desk and sitting down with an air of finality, "is to tell you the truth. Aviation school is not for children of your status. Only wealthy people become pilots. That's not my opinion. It's simply the economic reality of this field." He picked up a pen, already moving on to other paperwork, dismissing Marcus without even the courtesy of maintaining eye contact. "Go learn a trade. Become an aircraft mechanic. Or an electrician. Or a plumber. These are honest, respectable professions where you can make a decent living without drowning in debt. You're clearly a hard worker. Channel that work ethic into something achievable. Something achievable." As if his dream, the dream that had sustained him through childhood poverty, through doubt, through every obstacle life had thrown at him, was nothing more than a childish fantasy, an indulgence he should have outgrown years ago. Marcus looked down at the acceptance letter in his hands. The paper was crumpled now from his grip, dampened by the sweat of his palms. He stared at the words that had meant everything just 10 minutes ago. "Congratulations! Exceptional entrance examination scores. The highest we have seen in 15 years. They were just words. Empty words on a piece of paper that couldn't protect him from the reality Whitmore was laying out. Beautiful lies that had given him hope, only to make the crash back to earth that much more devastating. "Do we understand each other, Mr. Johnson?" Whitmore asked, not looking up from his paperwork. Marcus's throat was so tight he could barely speak. "Yes, sir." "Good. I trust you'll make the right decision and spare your family further financial hardship. There's no shame in knowing your limitations." Now Whitmore did look up, and there was something almost smug in his expression. "Sometimes the most courageous thing we can do is accept reality." Marcus turned toward the door, his movements mechanical, robotic. His legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Everything felt distant, surreal, like he was watching this happen to someone else from far away. His hand reached for the doorknob. Cold metal, solid, real. And he opened the door and walked out, the admission letter still clutched in his trembling hand. The door closed behind him with a soft, final click that sounded like the end of everything. The hallway stretched before him like a tunnel. The walls were lined with photographs, decades of graduating classes, rows and rows of smiling faces in pristine uniforms, all radiating confidence and success. Marcus walked past them in a daze, and he noticed something he hadn't seen before. Almost every face was white. Almost every smile belonged to someone whose family had money. He made it outside before the first tears came. The late afternoon sun was brutally bright, mocking him with its cheerfulness. He found a bench behind the building, in a small area shaded by trees where no one could see him, and he sat down heavily. The letter was still in his hands. He looked at it one more time, at the word congratulations, that now felt like the cruelest irony. And in that moment, sitting alone with his shattered dreams, Marcus thought about all the other kids out there. Kids like him, brilliant and hardworking and full of passion, who would be told the same thing. That their dreams weren't for people like them. That they should accept their place. That the sky wasn't theirs to claim. If you've ever been told your dreams aren't worth anything, if someone has ever looked at you and decided what you could or couldn't become based on where you came from rather than what burns inside you, hit that subscribe button right now. Because kids like Marcus need to hear stories like this. They need to know that sometimes, the people who try to clip your wings are the ones who never had the courage to fly themselves. Subscribe so we can share more stories of people who refuse to stay grounded. But let's go back. Let's rewind the clock 11 years and understand how we got here. How a dream can take root in a child's heart and grow so powerful that even the cruelest words can't completely destroy it. Marcus Johnson was 7 years old when he discovered what freedom looked like. It was his birthday, March 15th, and like most things in the Johnson household, celebrations were modest. There wasn't money for Chuck E. Cheese or a big party with store-bought cake and themed decorations. But Marcus's father, James Johnson, had been saving for something special. For months, he'd been setting aside $1 here, $2 there, hiding them in an envelope taped to the back of the bathroom mirror where bill collectors couldn't find them. $53. That's what he'd managed to save. Enough for 2 round-trip bus tickets to Metropolitan Airport and a few hours at the public observation area. "We're going to watch the planes," James announced that morning, and Marcus's entire face lit up like someone had switched on a light inside him. They took 2 buses to get there. The 47 downtown, transferred to the 82 express. The trip took 90 minutes, but Marcus didn't complain once. He pressed his nose against the window the entire time, scanning the sky for planes, his small hands leaving smudge marks on the glass that James didn't have the heart to wipe away. When they finally arrived at the airport, Marcus practically vibrated with excitement. James had to hold his hand tightly to keep him from running straight into traffic as they crossed to the public observation area. A concrete pad with a chain-link fence that gave a clear view of 2 of the airport's main runways. It wasn't fancy. The concrete was cracked, sprouting weeds in places. The fence was rusty, marked with years of hands gripping the metal. But to 7-year-old Marcus, it might as well have been the gates to heaven. The moment they reached the fence, Marcus gripped the metal links with both hands and stared. Before him, stretching out across acres of concrete, were airplanes. Real airplanes. Not pictures in books, not distant specks in the sky, but actual massive, gleaming machines of flight. A regional jet taxied past, close enough that Marcus could see the pilots through the cockpit windows. 2 men in crisp white shirts with epaulets on their shoulders, one of them speaking into his headset, both of them looking relaxed and confident, like they did this every day, which of course they did. "Dad," Marcus whispered, his voice full of awe. "They're right there. Real pilots." "Sure are, son. I'm gonna be just like them someday." James smiled, even as something twisted in his chest. "Yeah? You sure about that?" "I'm sure." Marcus spoke with the absolute certainty that only a 7-year-old can possess. That beautiful confidence that exists before the world teaches you to doubt yourself. "I'm gonna fly planes." Big ones just like that. And then it happened. The moment that would define the rest of Marcus's childhood. That would give him something to hold onto through every difficulty that lay ahead. A Boeing 747 lumbered onto the main runway. It was enormous, so large that it seemed impossible, a violation of natural law. The thing had to weigh hundreds of tons. How could something that massive, that heavy, that fundamentally earthbound possibly fly? Marcus watched, transfixed, as the 747 positioned itself at the beginning of the runway. There was a moment of stillness, of potential energy building, and then, the engines roared to life. Even from the observation area, separated by hundreds of yards and a tall fence, the sound was incredible. A deep, powerful thunder that Marcus felt in his chest, in his bones. The plane began to roll, slowly at first, then faster, faster. The nose still pointed at the ground, the wheels still firmly on concrete, but gathering speed with every second. Marcus's hands gripped the fence so tightly his knuckles turned white. His breath caught in his throat. His entire body leaned forward as if he could somehow will the plane into the air through sheer force of wanting. And then, magic. The nose lifted, just a little at first, then more. The front wheels came off the ground. And then, impossibly, beautifully, the rear wheels lifted too. The entire massive aircraft, every ton of metal and fuel and cargo and human beings, defied gravity and rose into the air, climbed. Higher and higher, the angle steep, the engines screaming their defiance at physics. Marcus watched with his mouth open, barely breathing, as the 747 rose into the clear blue sky, growing smaller and smaller until it became a silver speck against the clouds, and then vanished entirely. He stood there, gripping that fence, staring at the empty sky where the plane had been, and something fundamental shifted inside him. It wasn't just that he wanted to fly. It was that he needed to. That dream didn't just enter his heart. It exploded there, taking root so deeply that it became part of his DNA, inseparable from who he was. "Dad," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "How does it do that? How does something so big fly?" James knelt down beside his son, one hand on Marcus's small shoulder. "Physics, son. It's all science. The engines push it forward, that's thrust. The wings are shaped so that when air moves over them, it creates lift. Lift fights against weight and drag, and if you have enough thrust and the right wing shape, you can overcome gravity." Marcus absorbed every word like gospel. "I want to learn it. I want to learn all of it. I want to know everything about how planes fly." "That's a lot of studying, son. A lot of math and science." Marcus turned to look at his father, and James was struck by the intensity in those young eyes. "I don't care. I'll study forever if I have to. I'm gonna be a pilot, Dad. I'm gonna fly planes just like that one." They stayed at that fence for 3 more hours, watching plane after plane take off and land. Marcus asked 1,000 questions, and James answered what he could, promising to help find the answers to everything else. That night, lying in his small bed, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars his mother had stuck to the ceiling, Marcus made a promise to himself. "I will fly, no matter what it takes. I will touch the sky." It was a promise that would be tested in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. By the time Marcus turned 13, he had read every book in the public library's aviation section. Twice. He could name every component of a Cessna 172, explain the principles of aerodynamics, discuss weather patterns and their effects on flight. His notebooks were filled with diagrams of aircraft, calculations of thrust-to-weight ratios, sketches of wing designs. His mother had made him the pilot uniform for his 10th birthday, navy blue shirt with shiny buttons, tailored pants, cardboard wings covered in foil, a toy badge painted gold. Marcus wore those wings pinned to his shirt every single day. They became part of him, as essential as breathing. At school, kids called him the airplane kid. Some of them teased him. Most of them just found him odd. This boy who wouldn't shut up about airplanes, who filled every margin with sketches of aircraft, who wore homemade pilot wings like they were real. Marcus didn't care. He knew who he was. He knew where he was going. And nothing was going to stop him, except perhaps himself. On a spring day in his 13th year, Marcus's class took a field trip to the Museum of Flight near Metropolitan Airport. The museum was full of decommissioned aircraft, beautiful machines preserved as history. Marcus loved every minute of it, absorbing every placard, every fact, every detail. But during lunch break, sitting outside on the museum's patio, Marcus could see the airport in the distance, could see active planes taking off and landing, could see the hangars, the terminals, the whole magnificent operation. The real thing was right there, less than a mile away, and something in him snapped. He'd been reading about aviation, studying it, dreaming about it for 6 years. 6 years of pictures and videos and descriptions. And the actual operational heart of aviation was right there. While his classmates ate their packed lunches, Marcus quietly stood up and walked away, across the parking lot, across a field, toward the chain-link fence that separated museum property from airport grounds. His heart pounded. His palms were sweating. He knew this was wrong, knew he could get in serious trouble, but he couldn't stop himself. He found a section where the fence was old, where the bottom had separated slightly from the concrete. He squeezed through, the metal scraping against his back, and then he was on airport property. He walked like he belonged there, past a maintenance building, past fuel trucks, toward the tarmac, and then he was there, on the actual tarmac where actual planes taxied and parked. The scale was overwhelming. The noise, jet engines, beeping vehicles shouting ground crew. The smell of jet fuel, sharp and chemical and somehow beautiful. Marcus stood frozen in wonder as a regional jet taxied past him not 50 yards away. He could see the pilots through the cockpit windows, could see their hands moving over controls. That's where I belong, he thought. He spotted a parked aircraft with a mobile stairway attached to the cabin door. The ground crew was on the other side of the plane. No one was watching the stairs. Marcus walked toward it like he was in a dream. He reached the base of the stairs and looked up. The cabin door was slightly open. He put his foot on the first step, then the second, then the third. His hand gripped the railing. His heart hammered, but he kept climbing, step after step until he reached the top and stood at the cabin door. He could see inside, could see the rows of seats, and further forward, through the cabin, he could just barely glimpse the cockpit, that sacred space where the magic happened. His hand reached toward the door handle, trembling. "Hey, what are you doing up there?" The shout came from below. Marcus spun around to see 2 airport security guards running toward the stairs, their faces red with alarm. His brief moment of glory was over. He descended the stairs slowly, his legs shaking. The security guards reached him, one of them grabbing his arm firmly. "Do you have any idea how dangerous this is? How illegal? You can't be here." They walked him to a security office and called his school, which called his father. Marcus sat in a chair, waiting, his stomach churning with fear and shame. James Johnson arrived 40 minutes later, his face a mask of controlled fury. One of the security guards, a senior officer, an older black man, pulled James aside for a conversation Marcus couldn't hear. Then the guard walked over to Marcus. "What's your name, son?" "Marcus Johnson, sir." "Why'd you come out here?" Marcus looked down at his hands. "I wanted to see the planes. The real ones." "You like planes, huh?" "I'm going to be a pilot." The guard was quiet for a long moment. Then he sat down so he was eye level with Marcus. "A pilot," he repeated. "That's a big dream." "Yes, sir." "You know what it takes to become a pilot?" "Yes, sir. Training, certification, flight hours, type ratings. I know all of it." The guard's eyebrows rose. "You've done your research." "I've been studying since I was 7. The guard studied Marcus's face. This 13-year-old boy wearing makeshift pilot wings, who had just trespassed onto airport grounds because he couldn't resist getting close to his dream. "Let me tell you something," the guard said quietly. "The cockpit isn't a place you sneak into. You understand? It's a place you earn your way into." "Yes, sir. And it's hard. Harder than you think. You'll need education, money, training, certifications. And even then," he paused, and in that pause, Marcus heard all the unspoken words. "Even then, the world might not let you." But what the guard said aloud was, "Even then, you'll have to work twice as hard as everyone else to prove you belong there. You ready for that?" Marcus met the man's eyes. There was understanding there, the understanding of someone who had probably faced his own barriers. "Yes, sir," Marcus said firmly. "I am." The guard nodded. "You're getting off with a warning this time. No charges, no record." He leaned close. "But if I ever catch you on airport grounds without authorization again, there won't be a second warning. You understand?" "Yes, sir." "Thank you, sir." The guard straightened up. "Use the front door, son. When you're ready, when you've earned it, use the front door." Marcus nodded. That night, lying in bed, Marcus thought about those words. The cockpit isn't a place you sneak into. It's a place you earn your way into. He would earn it, no matter what it took, no matter how hard the road was. He would earn his way into that cockpit. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he hoped that other kids like him, kids who felt that same burning need to fly, who'd been told they couldn't, who faced barriers that had nothing to do with their ability, would somehow find their way too. That maybe, just maybe, if he made it, it would be easier for the next kid. And the next one after that. Imagine having a dream this powerful. Imagine knowing with absolute certainty what you're meant to do. Even when the world keeps telling you to stay in your lane, to be realistic, to settle for less. Subscribe to this channel if you believe that passion matters more than privilege. Subscribe if you think every kid deserves a chance to chase their dream, regardless of their zip code or their parents' bank account. Because Marcus's journey, and the journeys of countless others like him, deserve to be told. The years between 13 and 17 moved quickly, each one bringing Marcus closer to his goal while simultaneously revealing just how steep the mountain ahead of him truly was. High school was both exhilarating and exhausting. Marcus took every advanced class he could, AP Calculus, AP Physics, AP Chemistry. While his classmates groaned about the workload, Marcus devoured it. Every equation, every principle, every concept brought him one step closer to understanding the science of flight. His guidance counselor, Mrs. Henderson, called him into her office during his junior year. "Marcus, your grades are excellent. Really exceptional." She smiled, but there was something guarded in her expression. "Have you thought about college?" "Yes, ma'am. I want to study aerospace engineering or enroll in an aviation program." Mrs. Henderson's smile faltered slightly. "Those are ambitious goals. Have you looked at the costs? Aviation programs in particular are very expensive." Marcus had looked. He'd spent hours on library computers researching programs, costs, requirements. The numbers were staggering. Tuition at a good aviation school could run $70,000 to $100,000 per year. Even state universities with aerospace programs cost $25,000 to $40,000 annually. "I'm looking for scholarships," Marcus said. "That's good. That's smart." Mrs. Henderson pulled out a folder. "I've also compiled information on some excellent technical programs. Aircraft maintenance, for example. These programs are much more affordable, and there's good job security." "I don't want to maintain planes," Marcus interrupted, then immediately regretted his tone. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Henderson. I appreciate the information, but I want to fly them. That's always been the plan." Mrs. Henderson looked at him with an expression that was equal parts admiration and concern. She'd been a guidance counselor for 20 years. She'd seen plenty of students with big dreams, and she'd seen how often those dreams collided with economic reality. "Marcus, I'm not trying to discourage you, but I want you to be realistic about what's possible. Aviation is an expensive field. It's designed for people with significant financial resources. Students like you, brilliant, hardworking students from low-income families, often find themselves drowning in debt even if they manage to get into programs. So you're saying I shouldn't try? I'm saying you should have a backup plan. Something practical. Something achievable." There was that word again. Achievable. Marcus had thanked her politely and left her office, but her words haunted him. Designed for people with significant financial resources. As if aviation had been deliberately constructed to keep people like him out. But then, in the spring of his junior year, everything changed. Mrs. Chun, the librarian who had been supporting his dream since he was 7 years old, brought him a brochure. "Horizon Private Aviation Academy," she said, sliding it across the circulation desk. They have a scholarship program. Full tuition for exceptional minority students. Marcus stared at the glossy brochure. It showed sleek aircraft, state-of-the-art flight simulators, students in crisp uniforms. It looked like something from another world. Mrs. Chun, even with a scholarship, there would be fees, living expenses. Look at page 7, she interrupted gently. He flipped to page 7. There it was, the Hayes Scholarship for Exceptional Minority Students in Aviation. Full tuition, room, board, and a stipend for books and materials. Awarded annually to one student nationwide based on entrance examination scores and demonstrated passion for aviation. Marcus's hands started to shake. One scholarship, he whispered, for the entire country. You've been preparing for this your entire life, Mrs. Chun said firmly. You're ready. Was he? Marcus thought about the countless hours of study, the textbooks he'd memorized, the aviation magazines he'd collected, the online courses he'd completed. He thought about the notebook where he'd filled hundreds of pages with calculations and diagrams. When's the test? Next month. Application deadline is Friday. The application required an essay. Why I want to become a pilot. Marcus had been writing versions of that essay his entire life. In his head, in margins, in silent conversations with himself. He wrote it in one sitting, the words pouring out. I want to become a pilot because the sky represents something that society cannot limit. Freedom, possibility, the fundamental human desire to rise above our circumstances. I want to become a pilot not in spite of being a poor black kid from the projects, but because I am one. I want to be proof that capability and character matter more than circumstances of birth. I want young kids who look like me to see that the sky is not reserved for the wealthy or the privileged. It belongs to anyone with enough determination to earn their wings. His mother cried when she read it. His father pulled him into a hug that lasted a full minute. You submit that, James said, his voice rough. You take that test, and you show them exactly who you are. The entrance examination was held at a testing center 3 hours away. James borrowed his supervisor's car and drove Marcus there the night before, splurging on a cheap motel room so Marcus could be well rested. I'm not worried, James told his son that night. You've got this. Marcus barely slept. When the alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., he felt exhausted but strangely calm. You're Marcus Johnson, his father said, gripping both of his shoulders. You're my son. You're brilliant. You're hardworking. And you're going to walk in there and show them what you're made of. You hear me? Yes, sir. I believe in you. I believe in you. Those words echoed in Marcus's head as he entered the testing center with 24 other hopeful students. They looked confident. Many of them were chatting about flight hours they'd already logged, about family members who were pilots, about summer programs at aviation schools. Marcus said nothing. He found his seat, laid out his pencils, and waited. The test began, and something extraordinary happened. All the fear evaporated. Marcus looked at the first question, a complex problem involving fuel efficiency, wind resistance, and flight time calculations, and he just knew the answer. Not because he'd memorized it, but because he understood it. Deeply, intuitively, question after question, he worked through the exam with growing confidence. This was what he'd been born to do. Aviation theory, meteorology, physics, regulations, all of it made perfect sense. When time was called, Marcus set down his pencil with a strange sense of peace. He'd done his absolute best. 2 weeks later, the envelope arrived. Marcus was at school when the mail came, but his mother called him immediately, her voice shaking. Baby, you need to come home. Right now. Mom? What's wrong? Just come home. Please. He ran the entire 1.5 miles, imagining terrible scenarios. He burst through the door to find both his parents sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cream-colored envelope. Horizon Private Aviation Academy. His mother was crying. His father's eyes were red, and they were both smiling. Marcus approached slowly, hands shaking as he picked up the envelope. It was thick, that was supposed to be a good sign. He opened it. Dear Mr. Johnson, congratulations. Based on your exceptional entrance examination scores, the highest we have seen in 15 years, and your compelling application essay, We are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as this year's recipient of the Hayes Scholarship for Exceptional Minority Students in Aviation. The world tilted. Marcus couldn't breathe. The words blurred as tears filled his eyes. The highest scores in 15 years. Recipient of the scholarship. Full tuition, room, board, stipend. It was real. His parents were hugging him, and they were all crying together. A tangle of arms and tears and joy so intense it was almost painful. "You did it," his father kept saying. "You did it, son." That evening, they celebrated with a special dinner. They invited neighbors, family, friends. Everyone wanted to see the letter, to touch it, as though physical contact with this miracle might bring them luck. "You're going to be the first person in our family to go to college," his father said, raising a glass. "The first one. But you won't be the last. You're opening doors, son." Marcus looked around the small apartment at the faces of everyone he loved, at the pride and hope in their eyes. And he made a silent promise. He would not waste this opportunity. He would work harder than anyone else. He would excel. He would make them proud. But there was still the matter of additional expenses. Even with the scholarship covering tuition, room, and board, there were other costs. The program required specific supplies, textbooks, a flight computer, charts, proper shoes, additional uniforms. The list totaled $3,000, a fraction of what the scholarship covered, but still an insurmountable sum for the Johnson family. "We'll figure it out," James said firmly. "I'll talk to the bank about a loan." "Dad, you can't." "I can and I will. This is your chance, Marcus. Our chance. We're not letting it slip away." So James Johnson, who had never borrowed money except for the apartment deposit, walked into a bank and asked for a loan. His credit wasn't great. How could it be, living paycheck to paycheck? But he had steady employment, and the loan officer listened to his story. "My son got a full scholarship to Horizon Aviation Academy," James explained. "Out of hundreds of applicants nationwide, they chose him. He scored higher than anyone in 15 years. The loan officer smiled. "That's quite an achievement. But there are expenses the scholarship doesn't cover. $3,000. I need to borrow $3,000 so my son can start school. This is his only chance." The loan officer looked at the application, at the financial statements showing a family barely getting by. She looked at James's face, at the desperate hope there. "Mr. Johnson, I'm approving your loan. 5 years to pay it back, low interest. Your son sounds like he's going places." When James told Marcus about the loan, he was matter-of-fact. "It's done. You've got everything you need. Now show them what you're made of." Marcus hugged his father for a long time. He felt the weight of the sacrifice, the enormous trust his parents were placing in him. This loan represented months of his father's wages. He couldn't fail. He wouldn't. The week before he left for Horizon, Marcus wore his homemade pilot uniform one last time. He was 17 now, too tall for it. His mother had let out the seams multiple times, but it was still snug. The buttons were tarnished, the fabric worn soft. He stood in front of the mirror and saluted his reflection. "Captain Marcus Johnson," he said, and this time he could actually see it. Could see himself in a real uniform, in a real cockpit, living the dream. He was ready. He was going to fly. And he thought about all the kids out there who had dreams like his. Kids who were brilliant and passionate but didn't have the resources, who faced the same barriers, who were told to be realistic and achievable. If he made it, when he made it, maybe it would be proof that the system could work. That dreams could come true even when the odds were stacked against you. This is it. This is the moment when hard work meets opportunity. When a family that has nothing gives everything to make a dream possible. When a boy who was told the sky isn't for people like him gets handed a key to the clouds. Subscribe if you believe in the power of investment. Not just financial but emotional, the kind that says, "I believe in you even when the world doesn't." Marcus got his chance. Help us make sure more kids like him get their chances too. The first payment was due in August. James had made arrangements with the loan. Everything was set. And then life happened. In July, 3 weeks before Marcus was supposed to leave for Horizon, Sarah Johnson collapsed while hanging laundry. One moment she was pinning sheets to the line, And the next, she was on the ground, the world spinning, pain radiating through her chest. Emergency room, ambulance, tests, doctors with serious expressions. A heart condition. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but requiring medication, monitoring, and rest. And of course, bills. Medical bills that insurance only partially covered. The Johnson family had to make a choice. "We're paying for Marcus's school," James said firmly when the hospital social worker started talking about payment plans. "That's non-negotiable." "James," Sarah whispered from her hospital bed, "maybe Marcus should wait a year." "No." James's voice cracked. "He's worked his entire life for this. This scholarship doesn't wait. If he doesn't take it now, someone else gets it. This is his one chance." They scraped together the first payment, $3,000 for books, supplies, and fees, and sent Marcus off to Horizon in late August. He left with a duffel bag of second-hand clothes, a calculator, and a heart full of dreams mixed with guilt. "You focus on school," his mother told him, still weak but insistent. "Don't you worry about us." Horizon Private Aviation Academy was everything Marcus had imagined and more. The campus was beautiful modern buildings, pristine hangars, rows of training aircraft gleaming in the sun. His classmates came from all over the country, most of them from families who thought nothing of the costs Marcus's parents had sacrificed everything to cover. He threw himself into his studies with an intensity that made his high school dedication look casual. While other students went out on weekends, Marcus stayed in the flight simulators. While they slept in, he was in the library before dawn. His instructors noticed. Captain Reynolds, a former Air Force pilot, pulled Marcus aside one day. "Johnson, you're excelling. Top 5% of your class already. Keep this up, and you'll have airlines recruiting you before graduation." Marcus felt 10 feet tall. This was it. Everything he'd worked for finally within reach. But back home, the bills were piling up. Sarah's medication was expensive. She couldn't return to work. The doctor had been clear about avoiding physical strain. James picked up extra shifts, working himself to exhaustion. But it wasn't enough. In October, they missed the second tuition payment. The scholarship covered tuition itself, but there were quarterly fees for facility usage, insurance, and program costs. These payments, smaller than full tuition but still substantial, were the student's responsibility. James called the school's financial office. "I need more time. My wife has been ill. It'll take me another month to get the money together." "Mr. Johnson, I understand," the voice said with practiced sympathy. "But we have policies." The payment was due October 1st. It's now October 15th. Without payment by the end of the month, your son's enrollment will be suspended. Suspended? But he has a scholarship. The scholarship covers tuition only. The auxiliary fees must be paid to maintain active enrollment. "I'm sorry, but those are the terms." James worked even more hours. He borrowed money from his brother, from friends, from anyone who would lend it. By October 28th, he had half of what was owed. It wasn't enough. On November 2nd, Marcus was called to the administration office. Mr. Theodore Whitmore sat behind his massive mahogany desk. Next to him was Ms. Patricia Chun, the school's financial director. "Mr. Johnson," Whitmore began, "I assume you know why you're here." Marcus's throat was tight. "My family's having financial difficulties. My mother has been sick." "Yes, we're aware." Whitmore's tone suggested this was an inconvenience. "The fact remains that your account is delinquent. Substantially so. My father is working on it. He just needs a little more time." "Mr. Johnson," Whitmore held up a hand. "Let me be direct. This isn't the first time we've dealt with scholarship students who overextend themselves. The scholarship covers tuition, yes, but there are many other costs. It's a very expensive field." "I understand that, sir. But, do you?" Whitmore leaned forward, something predatory in his eyes. "Because it seems to me that you and your family didn't fully appreciate what you were getting into. Perhaps if you'd chosen a more appropriate educational path, one more suited to your financial situation, you wouldn't be in this position." The word stung like acid. Miss Chun spoke up, her voice softer but no less final. What Mr. Whitmore is saying is that continuing in this program may not be financially feasible for your family. The quarterly fees will come due again in January and again in April. Even if you catch up on this payment, will you be able to make the next ones? Marcus's mind raced. I could work. I could get a part-time job. Your scholarship stipulates full-time enrollment and a minimum GPA of 3.8. Whitmore interrupted. Part-time employment is permitted, but realistically, between classes, flight hours, and studying, there's no time. Students who work typically see their grades suffer. And if your grades fall below 3.8, you lose the scholarship entirely. It was a trap. A catch, 22. He needed money to stay in school, but working would jeopardize his standing, which would cost him the scholarship. There has to be a way, Marcus said, hating the desperation in his voice. Whitmore stood, walked to the window, looked out at the training aircraft. Mr. Johnson, I'm going to be frank with you, just as I was when you first applied here. He turned back. I had concerns about awarding you the scholarship, not because of your test scores, those were excellent, but because of exactly this situation. The reality is that aviation is not just about being smart or working hard. It requires resources, significant, sustained financial resources. He walked closer. Students from wealthy families don't have these problems. If they hit a rough patch, their parents write a check. But students like you, you're trying to build a skyscraper on quicksand. That's not fair. Marcus started, anger rising. Fair. Whitmore's voice turned cold. Life isn't fair, Mr. Johnson. That's the lesson you should be learning here. Aviation school is not for children of your status. Only wealthy people become pilots. That's simply the reality of the industry. The sooner you accept that, the better off you'll be. The words detonated like bombs in Marcus's chest. Aviation school is not for children of your status. Only wealthy people become pilots. Whitmore continued, relentless. My advice to you, the same advice I would have given when you first applied, is to go learn a trade. You're clearly intelligent. You could be an excellent aircraft mechanic or an air traffic controller. These are respectable professions that don't require the financial investment of actually becoming a pilot. Marcus stood there, feeling like the floor had opened beneath him. His mind flashed back to that 13-year-old kid climbing those stairs, reaching for the cockpit, to every hour spent studying, to his father working 3 jobs, to his mother still recovering, worrying about him. All of it for this, for a wealthy man to tell him, again, that he didn't belong. What happens now? Marcus asked quietly. Your enrollment is suspended effective immediately, Miss Chun said. You'll need to clear out your dormitory by end of week. If you can bring your account current within 6 months, you can apply for reinstatement. But Mr. Johnson, she paused. Between you and me, families who can't make the quarterly payments rarely catch up. The debt just grows. You're saying I'm done. Whitmore shrugged. I'm saying you should think very carefully about whether continuing this pursuit makes sense. For you and for your family. You're 18 years old. You can still change direction, learn a practical skill, build a stable life. Chasing an unrealistic dream will only lead to more debt and disappointment. Marcus wanted to scream, wanted to overturn the desk. But he was 18, black, and poor, standing in an office with people who held all the power. Any outburst would only confirm whatever stereotypes they already held. So instead, he said the only thing he could. Yes, sir. I understand. Good. I truly am sorry it worked out this way. Whitmore didn't sound sorry at all. Ms. Chun will handle the administrative details. Marcus turned and walked out, past the photographs of successful alumni, all those smiling faces that would never include his, past the hangars and training aircraft. He ran until he reached the edge of campus, a small wooded area where no one could see him, and then Marcus Johnson, at 18 years old, with the highest entrance exam scores Horizon had seen in 15 years, with a dream that had sustained him his entire life, sat down on the cold ground and wept. He cried for the dream that was dying. He cried for his parents. He cried for the injustice of a world that measured worth in dollars. He cried for every hour of study, every sacrifice. For the boy in the homemade uniform who had believed the sky belonged to anyone brave enough to reach for it. He pulled out his phone and called his father. "Dad," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm coming home." The silence on the other end was devastating. "What happened?" Marcus told him. "All of it. It's my fault," James said, crying now too. "I couldn't make the payment. I failed you."
"No, Dad.
"You didn't fail me. The system failed us." But that didn't make it hurt any less. 3 days later, Marcus packed his duffel bag and walked through campus one last time. A few classmates came to say goodbye. Some seemed genuinely sad. Others looked uncomfortable, as though poverty might be contagious. "What will you do now?" asked Derek, one of the few people Marcus had considered a friend. Marcus looked out at a training aircraft taking off. "I don't know. I honestly don't know." The bus ride home took 6 hours. Marcus stared out the window, watching the landscape blur past. When the bus pulled in, his father was waiting. They hugged, and neither said anything for a long time.
"I'm sorry," James whispered.
"I know, Dad. Me too." That night, Marcus lay in his old bed, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars. They seemed dimmer than he remembered. He thought about Whitmore's words. "Aviation school is not for children of your status. Only wealthy people become pilots." Was it true? Was his dream nothing more than a delusion? Maybe he should learn a trade, become a mechanic. It was practical, achievable, but the thought of it made his chest feel tight. He fell asleep eventually, exhausted by grief, and dreamed of falling from the sky. And somewhere in that dream, he heard a voice. Maybe his own, maybe the security guard from years ago, maybe all the people who'd ever believed in him, whispering, "This isn't over. This can't be how it ends." Can you believe a young man, brilliant, hardworking, with the highest test scores they'd seen in 15 years, was told he doesn't belong because his family hit a rough patch? Because they're not wealthy? This is the system so many young people face. They do everything right, and it's still not enough. Subscribe if this makes you angry. Subscribe if you believe that poverty should not be destiny. Subscribe if you think a kid's dreams matter more than the size of their family's bank account. Hit that button because Marcus's story isn't over yet, and neither is the fight for kids like him. For 3 months, Marcus existed in a fog of depression so thick he could barely see through it. He got a job at a warehouse, loading boxes onto trucks for minimum wage. The work was mindless, repetitive, soul-crushing. Every day, he watched planes pass overhead, and every day, it felt like they were mocking him. "You almost made it." Almost. His parents tried to help. His mother made his favorite meals. His father talked about taking time to regroup and exploring other options. But Marcus could see the guilt in their eyes, the weight of feeling like they'd let him down. "You didn't let me down," Marcus told them one evening at dinner. "The system let us down. The world let us down. Not you. Never you." But words didn't ease the pain for any of them. At night, Marcus lay in bed and replayed everything. The acceptance letter, the scholarship, those few precious months at Horizon where he'd actually lived his dream. And then Whitmore's words over and over, "Aviation school is not for children of your status." He thought about giving up, about accepting that maybe people like him weren't meant to fly, about finding something realistic and achievable and just existing. Not living, but existing. It would have been easier. But then, on a cold February morning, something changed. Marcus was taking his lunch break at the warehouse, sitting on a concrete loading dock, eating a sandwich his mother had packed, when he heard it. The roar of jet engines. Close. Very close. He looked up to see a military transport plane, a C-130 Hercules, flying low over the industrial district, probably heading to the nearby Air Force Base. It was massive, powerful, painted in military gray with the unmistakable insignia of the United States Air Force on its tail. And just like that, like a switch being flipped, something ignited inside Marcus's chest. The Air Force. Why hadn't he thought of it before? He pulled out his phone and started searching. United States Air Force. Pilot training. Requirements. The information flooded his screen. The Air Force trained pilots. Not just trained them, they paid for the training. And more than that, they were looking for talent, for dedication, for people who could pass rigorous tests and meet high standards. Standards Marcus knew he could meet. His heart started racing, the first time in 3 months he'd felt anything resembling hope. He read page after page. The path was clear. Enlist, score high on the AFOCT, Air Force Officer Qualifying Test, demonstrate leadership potential, get recommended for officer training school, then on to pilot training. It wasn't easy. The acceptance rate for pilot training was competitive. But it was possible. And unlike Horizon, it didn't require his family to go into debt. The Air Force would pay him, train him, give him the opportunity he'd been denied. That evening, Marcus walked into the apartment with something his parents hadn't seen in months. Purpose in his eyes. "I'm joining the Air Force," he announced. James and Sarah looked at each other, then at their son. "The Air Force," Sarah repeated. "They train pilots, and they're looking for people like me. People who score well on tests, who are disciplined, who want it badly enough to work for it. This is my path, Mom. This is how I'm going to fly." James stood up and walked over to his son. He looked at Marcus's face, really looked at it, and saw something that had been missing for months. That old fire, that certainty, that refusal to give up. "You're sure about this?" James asked. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." "Then let's do it." 2 weeks later, Marcus walked into the Air Force recruitment office. The recruiter, Staff Sergeant Martinez, was a no-nonsense woman in her mid-30s with sharp eyes that seemed to assess Marcus the moment he walked through the door. "I want to be a pilot," Marcus said without preamble. Martinez smiled slightly. "Everyone wants to be a pilot. Do you know what it takes?" "Yes, ma'am. I need to enlist, complete basic training, score high on the AFOCT, get recommended for OTS, and then compete for a pilot training slot." Martinez's eyebrows rose. "You've done your homework." "I've been preparing to be a pilot since I was 7 years old, ma'am." Something in Marcus's tone, the absolute conviction, made Martinez lean forward. "Tell me your story." So Marcus told her. All of it. The dream that started at 7. The years of study. The scholarship to Horizon. The financial crisis that forced him out. Whitmore's words. The 3 months of despair. And then the C-130 flying overhead, reigniting everything. When he finished, Martinez was quiet for a long moment. "The Air Force doesn't care how much money your family has," she said finally. "We care about 3 things. Can you meet our standards? Will you work harder than you've ever worked in your life? And do you have the character to be an officer? Based on what you've told me, I think you can. But I need to be honest with you. Pilot training is incredibly competitive. Most people who want it don't get it." "I'll get it," Marcus said simply. Martinez studied his face. "Yeah," she said slowly. "I believe you might." Marcus enlisted in March. Basic training at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas started in April. It was 8 weeks of the most intense physical and mental challenge Marcus had ever faced. Drill sergeants screaming in his face. Physical training at 4 a.m. Obstacle course. Weapons training. Room inspections where a single wrinkle in his bedsheet could earn him punishment. But for Marcus, it wasn't hardship. It was purpose. Every morning, when he laced up his boots and stood at attention, he thought, "I'm one step closer to flying." He wasn't the strongest recruit. He wasn't the fastest. But he was the most determined. When others complained, Marcus stayed silent and pushed harder. When others cut corners, Marcus did it right. When others talked about quitting, Marcus visualized himself in a cockpit. His training instructors noticed. Airman Johnson, Technical Sergeant Williams, called out one afternoon during drill. "Why are you here?" "To become a pilot, sir." "Why do you want to be a pilot?" Marcus stood at attention, his voice carrying across the training field. "Because the sky doesn't care where you come from, sir. It only cares if you're good enough to fly in it." Williams had studied Marcus for a moment, then nodded. "Carry on, airman." After basic training, Marcus was assigned to his first duty station while he prepared for the AFOCT. He worked during the day and studied every night. The test covered verbal analogies, arithmetic reasoning, word knowledge, math knowledge, instrument comprehension, block counting, aviation information, and more. Marcus had been preparing for tests like this his entire life. When test day came, he walked in confident. For hours later, he walked out knowing he'd crushed it. The scores came back 3 weeks later. 96th percentile overall. 99th percentile in aviation knowledge. With those scores and strong recommendations from his commanders, Marcus was accepted to officer training school. OTS was 12 weeks of leadership training at Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama. It was designed to transform enlisted airmen and civilians into Air Force officers. The standards were high. The expectations were higher. Marcus thrived. He led his flight, his group of fellow candidates, to top performance in inspections. He scored highest in his class on academic tests. He excelled in leadership exercises. And throughout it all, he kept his eye on the prize, pilot training. Near the end of OTS, all candidates met with a senior officer to discuss their career paths. Marcus sat across from Colonel David Chun, a veteran pilot with 25 years of service. "Your scores are exceptional, Mr. Johnson," Colonel Chun said, reviewing Marcus's file. "Top of your class. Your commanders speak highly of your leadership and character. And your aviation knowledge scores." He looked up. 99th percentile. "That's rare." "Thank you, sir." "Why do you want to be a pilot?" Marcus had answered this question 100 times. But sitting across from an actual Air Force pilot, someone who had lived the dream Marcus was chasing, he felt the weight of the moment. "Sir, when I was 7 years old, I watched a 747 take off from Metropolitan Airport, and something changed inside me. I knew, not wanted but knew, that flying was what I was put on this earth to do. I've spent every day since then preparing for this.
I've faced obstacles.
I've been told I don't belong, that people like me can't be pilots. But the Air Force doesn't care about that. The Air Force cares about whether I can do the job. And I can, sir. I will." Colonel Chun looked at him for a long moment. Then he wrote something in Marcus's file. "I'm recommending you for pilot training," he said. "Don't make me regret it." "I won't, sir. I promise you I won't." Pilot training began in January at Shepherd Air Force Base in Texas. It was everything Marcus had dreamed of and more brutal than he could have imagined. Ground school, flight simulators, academics, physical training, survival training, and finally, actual flight instruction. The program was 52 weeks of pure intensity. The washout rate was high. The standards were unforgiving. Every flight was evaluated. Every mistake was noted. Fall too far behind and you were out. But Marcus had been preparing for this his entire life. His first time in an actual aircraft, a T-6 Texan II trainer, Marcus's hands shook as he strapped in. His instructor pilot, Captain Rodriguez, noticed. "Nervous, Lieutenant Johnson?" "Excited, sir," Marcus corrected. Rodriguez smiled. "Good answer. Let's fly." The engine roared to life. The propeller spun. Marcus's heart hammered as they taxied to the runway. "Texan 2-3, you're cleared for takeoff," came the voice from the tower. "Cleared for takeoff, Texan 2-3. Rodriguez responded, then said to Marcus, "Your aircraft." Marcus's hands moved to the controls, the stick, the throttle, the rudder pedals. 13 years after that 7-year-old boy had watched a 747 take off and knew his purpose, Marcus Johnson was finally at the controls of an aircraft. "Throttle up," Rodriguez instructed. Marcus pushed the throttle forward. The engine screamed. The aircraft began to roll, slowly at first, then faster. The nose pointed down the runway. The speed built. 60 knots, 80 knots, 100 knots. "Rotate," Rodriguez said. Marcus pulled back gently on the stick. The nose lifted. The wheels left the ground. And Marcus Johnson was flying. Flying. He was actually flying. Tears streamed down his face inside his oxygen mask as the ground fell away beneath them, as the aircraft climbed into the clear Texas sky. All those years of dreaming, of studying, of being told he couldn't, of fighting against a system designed to keep him out. All of it had led to this moment. "How does it feel, Lieutenant?" Rodriguez asked, his voice crackling through the intercom. Marcus's voice came out choked with emotion. Like coming home, sir. For the next year, Marcus lived and breathed aviation. He flew in every condition. Clear skies, instrument approaches, night flights, formation flying. He studied aerodynamics, weather, navigation, emergency procedures. He pushed himself beyond every limit, and he excelled. His instructors were impressed. Johnson has natural instincts. One wrote in an evaluation. Combines technical knowledge with situational awareness. Exceptional candidate for fighter or cargo aircraft. Other students struggled. Some washed out, but Marcus kept pushing. When others went out on weekends, he was in the flight simulator. When others complained about the difficulty, Marcus stayed silent and worked harder. He thought often about Whitmore's words. Aviation school is not for children of your status. Every successful flight was proof that Whitmore had been wrong. Every passing grade was evidence that poverty didn't determine capability. Every commendation was a middle finger to every person who'd ever told him he didn't belong. And then came graduation. The United States Air Force pilot training graduation ceremony was held on a sunny afternoon in December. Families filled the auditorium. Proud parents, excited children, supportive spouses. And in the front row, wearing their Sunday best, sat James and Sarah Johnson. They'd saved for months to afford the trip to Texas. James had taken time off work, something he never did. Sarah had bought a new dress, her first in 5 years, because their son was graduating as a pilot. When Marcus walked across that stage in his dress blues to receive his pilot wings, real wings, silver and proud, nothing like the cardboard and foil versions his mother had made. He saw his parents in the audience. His father was crying. His mother was crying. And Marcus, standing at attention as the commander pinned those wings to his chest, felt something break open inside him. Not breaking apart, but breaking open. All the pain, all the doubt, all the times he'd been told he wasn't good enough, that he didn't belong, that the sky wasn't for people like him. All of it was washed away by this single moment. Congratulations, Lieutenant Johnson, the commander said. You've earned these wings. Wear them with pride. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. But Marcus wasn't thinking about the commander. He was looking at his parents. At his father, who'd taken out a loan they couldn't afford because he believed in his son. At his mother, who'd sewn that first uniform with her own hands because she wanted him to feel like he could be anything. After the ceremony, Marcus found them in the crowd. He didn't say anything. He just hugged them both, and they held each other, crying and laughing at the same time. You did it, James whispered. You actually did it. We did it, Dad. We did it together. That night, lying in his barracks, Marcus stared at the wings on his uniform. He thought about the security guard who'd told him the cockpit was a place you earned your way into. He thought about Mrs. Chun, the librarian who'd given him that first brochure. He thought about Mr. Harrison who'd said, I believe in you. He thought about every person who'd supported him and every person who doubted him. And he thought about the next assignment he'd received. He was being recommended for advanced training in multi-engine cargo aircraft, with potential assignment to see 17 Globemasters, massive military transport planes that flew worldwide missions. But more than that, he was being considered for something else. His commanders had seen his test scores, his leadership ability, his character. They were recommending him for evaluation as an instructor pilot, a position usually reserved for much more experienced officers. Marcus Johnson, the poor black kid who'd been told aviation wasn't for people of his status, was about to become not just a pilot, but a pilot who would train other pilots. The irony wasn't lost on him. Neither was the responsibility. He's proving dreams can't be stopped. Not by poverty. Not by prejudice. Not by people who measure worth in dollars instead of determination. Subscribe if this gives you hope. Subscribe if you believe that when one person breaks through, they make it easier for the next person, and the next one after that. Marcus refused to let them ground him, and his story is proof that the sky really does belong to anyone brave enough to reach for it. 2 years later, Captain Marcus Johnson received orders that made him smile. Temporary duty assignment for a recruiting and community outreach mission to his home state. He would be part of a demonstration team showcasing Air Force capabilities to communities, particularly focusing on STEM education and military career opportunities for underserved populations. The demonstrations involved a UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter, dramatic, impressive, impossible to ignore. Marcus made a request to his commanding officer. Could one of the demonstration stops be scheduled for the town where he'd grown up? Specifically, for a field near a certain private aviation academy? His CO, who knew Marcus's story, smiled. I think we can arrange that. The date was set for a Saturday in October. Perfect weather. Clear skies. Marcus didn't tell anyone he was coming. Not his parents, not his old friends, not anyone at Horizon. He wanted this to be a surprise. The night before, staying at a hotel near the base, Marcus polished his boots until they gleamed. He pressed his flight suit with military precision. He checked every detail of his uniform. The wings on his chest, the captain's bars on his shoulders, the patches that told the story of his service. He looked at himself in the mirror, and for just a moment, he saw that 7-year-old boy in the homemade uniform, saluting his reflection and dreaming of flying. "We made it," he whispered. "We actually made it." The Black Hawk touched down in the field adjacent to Horizon Private Aviation Academy at precisely 1,400 hours. The sound of the rotors was thunderous, dramatic, drawing attention from across the entire campus. Students and faculty came outside to watch, because you don't ignore a military helicopter landing next to your school. Marcus waited until the rotor slowed, then climbed out. He was in full uniform, every inch the professional military officer, walking with the confidence of someone who had earned the right to be exactly where he was. He timed this perfectly. Saturday afternoon. The administration building would be open. Mr. Whitmore always kept Saturday hours during the academic year, meeting with prospective students and their families. Marcus walked across the field toward campus. People stared. Students pointed. Faculty members whispered to each other. And then he saw him, Mr. Theodore Whitmore, standing on the steps of the administration building, talking with a family, probably giving them the same sales pitch he'd given hundreds of families, explaining how Horizon was the finest aviation academy in the country, how they produced the best pilots. Marcus walked directly toward him. Whitmore saw him coming, saw the uniform, the helicopter in the background, the pilot wings, and his expression shifted through several emotions in rapid succession. Confusion, recognition, disbelief, and finally something that looked almost like fear, because he recognized Marcus Johnson. He remembered the poor black kid he'd dismissed, the one he'd told that aviation wasn't for people of his status, the one he'd sent home with his dreams in pieces. And now that kid was walking toward him in a United States Air Force uniform, with captain's bars and pilot wings, having just arrived in a military helicopter. Whitmore excused himself from the family, his voice slightly shaky, and stepped toward Marcus, his hand extended, his face breaking into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Johnson. Captain Johnson. This is quite a surprise." Marcus walked past him, didn't stop, didn't shake his hand, didn't acknowledge the greeting at all. He simply walked past, his eyes forward, his posture perfect, his silence more devastating than any words could have been. Behind him, he heard Whitmore's voice falter. "Captain Johnson? We're so proud that one of our students." Marcus stopped, turned slowly, looked Whitmore directly in the eye. "I was never one of your students, Mr. Whitmore. You made sure of that." His voice was calm, professional, cold. "You told me that aviation school wasn't for children of my status, that only wealthy people become pilots. You told me to go learn a trade." Whitmore's face went pale. The family he'd been meeting with was watching. Students had gathered. Faculty members had stopped to observe. That's not exactly what Whitmore stammered. "It's exactly what you said." Marcus took a step closer, his presence commanding. "You looked at a kid with the highest test scores your academy had seen in 15 years, and you dismissed him because his family didn't have money. You didn't see potential. You didn't see passion or dedication or capability. You saw a bank account balance, and you decided that was all that mattered. We have financial constraints, you have to understand." "I understand perfectly," Marcus interrupted. I understand that your system is designed to keep people like me out. I understand that you measure worth in dollars instead of character. I understand that you're more comfortable with inequality than you are with excellence from unexpected places. He gestured back toward the helicopter. That's a UH-60 Black Hawk. I'm qualified to fly it, along with C-17 Globemasters and several other aircraft. I'm a United States Air Force captain and instructor pilot. I train other pilots. And I got here without your help. In fact, I got here in spite of you. Whitmore looked like he wanted to disappear. Captain Johnson, I'm truly sorry if I'm not here for your apology, Marcus said. I'm here because the Air Force is partnering with schools in this district, public schools, underfunded schools, schools full of kids who've been told they can't achieve their dreams, to talk about opportunities in aviation and STEM fields. I'm here to tell kids that the sky doesn't have a price tag, that passion and determination can overcome barriers, that they can achieve things people tell them are impossible. He paused, letting that sink in. I'm here to be the person you refuse to be, someone who opens doors instead of slamming them shut. Then, without waiting for a response, Marcus turned and walked away, not back toward the helicopter, but toward the main quad, where students had gathered in a large group, drawn by the commotion. Behind him, he heard one of the faculty members say to Whitmore, "You turned him away?" Whitmore's response was inaudible. Marcus reached the group of students. They were young, fresh-faced, most of them looking at him with awe and curiosity. "Good afternoon," Marcus said, his voice carrying easily across the crowd. "I'm Captain Marcus Johnson, United States Air Force. Who here wants to hear about what it really takes to become a pilot?" Every hand shot up. Marcus smiled, a real smile this time. "Good, because I'm going to tell you something your administrators might not want you to know. You don't need to be rich to fly. You need to be dedicated. You need to work harder than you've ever worked. You need to refuse to give up when people tell you that you don't belong. But you do not need to be wealthy." He spent the next 2 hours there, talking with students, answering questions, explaining different paths to aviation careers. He talked about the Air Force, about scholarships, about community colleges with aviation programs, about working your way up. He gave out his email address to dozens of students who wanted more information. And through it all, Whitmore watched from a distance, his expression unreadable. When Marcus finally returned to the helicopter, his crew chief was grinning. "That was quite a statement, sir." "Felt good," Marcus admitted. "What did you say to that administrator?" He looked like he'd seen a ghost. "I didn't say anything he didn't need to hear." Marcus climbed into the helicopter. "Let's head to the next stop. We've got more kids to inspire." As the Black Hawk lifted off, Marcus looked down at Horizon Private Aviation Academy, at the buildings where he'd spent 2 precious months living his dream before it was ripped away, at the office where Whitmore had crushed him with words designed to destroy hope. The campus looked smaller from the air, less imposing, almost insignificant. Marcus smiled and turned away, looking toward the horizon. He'd returned not for revenge, but to prove a point. Not to rub Whitmore's face in his success, but to show every kid watching that the people who tried to limit them were wrong. The sky was his now, and he'd make damn sure the next generation knew they could reach it too. He didn't return for revenge. He returned to prove that when people try to clip your wings, the best response is to fly higher than they ever thought possible. Subscribe if this moment gave you chills. Subscribe if you believe that success is the best revenge, but lifting others up is even better. Marcus came back not to gloat, but to open doors for the next generation. Hit that subscribe button to be part of making sure more kids see the story and know that their dreams are valid, regardless of what anyone tells them. But Marcus's return to Horizon wasn't the end of his mission. It was the beginning. That evening, sitting in his hotel room after the day's demonstrations, Marcus thought about all the students he'd talked to, the questions they'd asked, the hope in their eyes, the fear in their voices when they mentioned cost, family expectations, not knowing where to start. And he thought about how many more kids there were just like them. Kids who had the passion, the intelligence, the dedication, but not the resources or knowledge to navigate the incredibly complex path to aviation careers. Marcus opened his laptop and started typing. What began as a simple idea, a website with information about different paths to becoming a pilot, quickly evolved into something more ambitious. An online platform, community, a resource hub for aspiring pilots from underserved communities. He called it Earn Your Wings, a tribute to that security guard who told 13-year-old Marcus that the cockpit was a place you earned your way into. The platform would include comprehensive guides to different aviation career paths, information about scholarships and financial aid, connections to mentors, professional pilots who volunteered their time, study resources for entrance exams and certifications, a community forum where aspiring pilots could share experiences and advice, stories of pilots from diverse backgrounds who'd overcome obstacles. Marcus worked on it every spare moment he had. He reached out to fellow pilots, both military and commercial, asking them to volunteer as mentors. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of pilots eager to help the next generation. He contacted aviation schools and organizations, asking them to post scholarship information on the platform. Some ignored him, but many said yes. He wrote content, endless hours of detailed guides about how to navigate the system, how to find funding, how to prepare for tests, how to avoid the pitfalls that had nearly derailed his own journey. 6 months later, Earn Your Wings officially launched. The response was immediate. Within the first week, 500 students had registered. Within a month, 3,000. They came from all over: inner cities, rural areas, immigrant families, foster care systems. Kids who'd been told they couldn't, that they shouldn't, that aviation wasn't for people like them. Marcus read their stories, and he saw himself in every single one. A 15-year-old girl from Detroit whose single mother worked 3 jobs. I thought pilots had to come from money. Thank you for showing me there's another way. A 17-year-old boy from rural Alabama who'd never even been on a plane. Your story gave me hope. I'm going to make this happen. A 16-year-old from foster care in Los Angeles. Everyone told me to be realistic. You proved that dreams are realistic if you work hard enough. Marcus responded to as many as he could, personally. Late nights, early mornings, whenever he had time. Because he remembered how isolating it felt to dream big in a world that told you to dream small. 1 year after the platform launched, Marcus received an email that made him stop in his tracks. It was from a student named Jamal Martinez, age 18, from Marcus's own hometown. Captain Johnson, the email read, I was one of the students at Horizon the day you landed in that helicopter. I was a scholarship student like you were, and I was struggling with the same problems: the fees, the financial stress, the feeling like I didn't belong. That day, watching you walk past Mr. Whitmore, seeing you in your uniform, hearing you talk about other paths to aviation, something changed for me. I realized I didn't need Horizon. There were other ways. I enlisted in the Air Force 3 months ago, and I leave for basic training next week. I've been using your platform to prepare for the AFOCT, and your mentors have been incredible. I just wanted to say thank you. You saved my dream when I was ready to give up on it. I'm going to be a pilot, Captain, because you showed me it was possible. Marcus read that email 3 times, his eyes watering. This was why he'd built the platform. This was why he'd returned to Horizon. Not to prove anything to Whitmore, but to be the beacon for someone else that he desperately needed when he was 18 and lost. He responded immediately, Jamal, congratulations on your enlistment. You've got a hard road ahead, but you can do this. Stay focused, work hard, and remember, the cockpit is a place you earn your way into. You're on your way to earning it. Proud of you. Keep me updated on your progress. Captain Johnson. 2 years later, Marcus received another update. Jamal had completed basic training, scored in the 95th percentile on the AFOCT, been accepted to OTS, and just received his slot for pilot training. I'm following your path, Jamal wrote, and I'm going to pay it forward the same way you did. Thank you for being my inspiration. Marcus shared Jamal's story on the platform, with permission, and it went viral within the aviation community. News outlets picked it up. The Air Force featured it in recruiting materials. And most importantly, Thousands more students found the platform and saw proof that the path was real. Earn Your Wings grew. Marcus recruited more mentor pilots. He established partnerships with community colleges and vocational programs. He created scholarship funds with his own money, not much at first, but every bit helped. And then, 3 years after launching the platform, Marcus received the invitation that completed the circle. Horizon Private Aviation Academy, under new leadership after Whitmore's retirement, reached out. They wanted to partner with Earn Your Wings. They wanted to establish a true needs-based scholarship program, one that covered not just tuition but all costs. They wanted to host workshops for underserved students. They wanted to change. Marcus's first instinct was to refuse. The wounds were still there, even if they'd scarred over. But then he thought about all the students on his platform who were qualified, who deserved a chance, who could thrive at a place like Horizon if only the financial barriers were removed. He thought about what revenge really meant. True revenge wasn't making Horizon suffer. True revenge was transforming it into the kind of place that would have accepted him unconditionally. So Marcus said yes, with conditions. The scholarship program had to be truly comprehensive: tuition, fees, room, board, books, equipment, everything. Selection had to be based solely on merit and passion, not on financial viability. And Horizon had to commit to actively recruiting from underserved communities. They agreed to all of it. The first Horizon Earn Your Wings scholarship was awarded the following year to a 17-year-old girl from a single-parent household in South Chicago. She had scored in the 98th percentile on the entrance exam and written an essay about how her mother's courage in immigrating to America inspired her to reach for impossible dreams. Marcus flew to Horizon for the scholarship ceremony. He walked into that same office where Whitmore had destroyed him, where he'd been told he didn't belong. But Whitmore was gone. And in his place was Dr. Sarah Chan, the new director, an Asian-American woman who'd herself overcome barriers to become a pilot and educator. "Captain Johnson," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for giving us the chance to do better. To be better." Marcus shook her hand. "Thank you for being willing to change. That takes courage too." The scholarship recipient, Maria Gonzalez, approached him shyly after the ceremony. "Captain Johnson, I read your story on the platform. That's why I applied here. Because you proved that people like us belong in places like this." Marcus looked at this young woman, brilliant, passionate, determined, standing where he'd once stood, holding an acceptance letter that would change her life. "You do belong here," he told her. "Don't let anyone ever make you doubt that. And when you get your wings, and you will remember to reach back and lift up the next person. That's how we change the system. One pilot at a time." Maria nodded, tears in her eyes. "I will. I promise." That evening, Marcus stood alone on the field where the Black Hawk had landed 3 years earlier. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Planes from the academy were practicing touch and goes, landing and taking off in the fading light. Marcus watched them and he thought about the journey. From 7-year-old boy at an airport fence, to 13-year-old trespasser on a tarmac, to 18-year-old crushed by rejection, to 21-year-old Air Force pilot, to 26-year-old mentor and advocate. He thought about every obstacle, every person who'd told him no, every barrier that had seemed insurmountable. And he thought about every person who'd said yes: his parents, Mrs. Chun the librarian, Mr. Harrison the teacher, Staff Sergeant Martinez the recruiter, Colonel Chun who'd recommended him for training, and countless others who'd believed in him when he'd struggled to believe in himself. Most of all, he thought about the kids, the thousands of them on his platform, working toward their own dreams, facing their own obstacles, refusing to give up. That's what legacy meant. Not the victories you achieved for yourself, but the doors you opened for others. Not the heights you reached, but the hands you extended to pull others up alongside you. Marcus pulled out his phone and opened the platform. There was a new message in the forum, from a 14-year-old in rural Mississippi. "I just found this site. I thought being a pilot was impossible for someone like me. But after reading all these stories, I think maybe it's not. Maybe I can do this too. Thank you for giving me hope." Marcus smiled and typed a response. "You absolutely can do this. The sky doesn't care where you come from. It only cares if you're brave enough to reach for it. Welcome to the community. We've got your back. Captain Marcus Johnson. He hit send, then looked back up at the planes practicing their landings, at the sky that had called to him for so long, at the horizon that stretched endlessly forward. The sky doesn't belong to the rich, Marcus said quietly to himself, repeating the words he'd said so many times to so many students. It belongs to anyone who dares to reach it. And somewhere, maybe in Detroit or rural Alabama or South Chicago or 1,000 other places, a kid was looking up at that same sky and dreaming the same impossible dream that 7-year-old Marcus had dreamed. A kid who would see Captain Marcus Johnson's story and think, if he made it, maybe I can too. A kid who would face obstacles and keep pushing, who would be told no and refuse to hear it, who would earn their way into that cockpit one determined step at a time. A kid who would then reach back and lift up the next one and the next one and the next one. That was how you changed the world. Not all at once, but one dream at a time. One pilot at a time. One kid who refused to give up at a time. Marcus Johnson had earned his wings. Now he was helping a generation earn theirs. And the sky would never be the same. He's giving the next generation wings. Not just through his story, but through real action, real resources, real change. Subscribe now if you believe that true success isn't just about reaching the top. It's about sending the elevator back down for others. Marcus didn't just overcome the system. He's transforming it so fewer kids have to fight the battles he fought. Hit that subscribe button to be part of this mission. Because every kid with a dream deserves a champion. Every kid reaching for the sky deserves a hand pulling them up. And every story like Marcus's deserves to be told so that the next generation knows. Your dreams are valid, your passion matters, and the sky is waiting for you. Subscribe, share this story, and help us build a world where talent and determination matter more than the balance in your parents' bank account. Because that's the world Marcus is building, one pilot at a time.